Hey friends, and welcome to the first episode of the How to Market series, where I'm going to try to break down specific questions you guys had, as well as just kind of generic things that I think are important if you're getting into markets. If you have been doing markets and you're just trying to figure out some other new info and tips, this is going to be the series for you. So welcome, and first, this episode is going to be basically just talking about how my market experience has been and what I've learned over the last year and a few months. I started doing markets in September, October of 2023, and then last year I did markets all year and did over 30 events and 40 days total, or like 45 days total of market days. So I feel like I have a little experience under my belt to give you guys some tips and tricks and, you know, learn from my mistakes, as well as just talk about what's worked for me and what hasn't. I just can't believe I've done over a year of markets. That's pretty wild. And this year we're already stacking up for quite a few events. I'm still deciding if I'm going to be taking on as many events as I did last year. It's kind of shaping out like it probably will be that. Right now, markets are pretty much my #1 income for my business. Online sales do pretty well. It's grown a lot in the last year thanks to a lot of you guys, as well as my social media with Instagram and TikTok. But markets have been the #1 thing for my business. It definitely is like a huge chunk of my income for the shop is through doing events and gaining customers from in-person events. A lot of my customers come from mailing lists that people sign up for in person, as well as just like, you know, seeing you out in public. A lot of times I get asked if I have a storefront, and then I have to be like, I don't, not yet, hopefully soon. Or if I'm in shops, and that is something obviously I'm expanding on, but that's gonna be a different video. Today we're talking about markets. So I like to kind of make sure, I mean, a lot of my customers come from markets online as well, and that's why I do think it is something that's super helpful if you're not sure on how to kind of grow your community, if online hasn't been the best for you. I will say though, it gets kind of difficult when you're doing markets back to back to back, and it's not for the faint of heart, but if it's something you're interested in, this is it. Let's talk about it. I started doing markets mostly because I wanted to see what it was like. I saw a lot of people obviously like on TikTok and Instagram and even on here that shared their market experiences, talked about huge profit margins that they would make, and just the overall experience looked fun. I was very nervous, and honestly I considered for quite a few years to do markets before I actually did the plunge, but I never was ready. And I definitely think that's one thing that we'll talk about in the next video on how to get into markets and like getting started. But it definitely is something you need to have enough inventory and variety and, you know, be ready to hopefully sell out or not sell. It's kind of this weird balance. So when I started doing markets in October, I started really small. I did little farm pop-ups. It was really inexpensive, and it wasn't a huge risk besides inventory, which was a little scary because I wasn't sure how things would go. You kind of go in blind for most events and hope for the best, and you can just take, you know, face value of what the event is telling you, as well as what other vendors might tell you, and it's definitely a learning curve. So my first markets though ended up being really successful. I was really shocked. I couldn't believe, you know, and now compared to like what I'm making at certain markets, it's a lot less, but I think it was like my first event I made $600 in that one event, and it was insane, and it was a big game changer and a really big eye-opener. It also was something that helped me a lot figure out what I wanted to do as far as expanding which lines, what was being successful, and that's been my huge like decider on new products in the last year. Markets really are a great place to see in person what people think of your products, see what is working and what's not, and it's a lot of self-reflection that you have at these events. I definitely will say, if you're somebody who's a little sensitive and maybe doesn't want to get that input in person, markets might be really hard for you, and it might feel like they're not going well if you're not willing to change. I think because I was willing to grow and change and, you know, take losses and figure out what's successful, I feel like markets were huge and beneficial to my business. I can definitely see, you know, I'm just always someone that's sitting at an event and I'm watching how people interact with my display, how they interact with my products, as well as just interacting in general, like with the vibe. If they're coming in because a lot of times, like, a lot of my stuff is very bright and pink and colorful, and I try to draw people in with that, as well as very clean displays and making it easy for customers. There's definitely been times where I realize the display is not working and I just make a note of it and, you know, brainstorm how to change that for the next event. If you're somebody who's really rigid and you don't like the idea of having to change, I don't know what to tell you, because that's pretty much small business life in general, and markets specifically. I think you have to be ready to be on the fly, change things, or just constantly evolve. And that's something I personally really love. I love when I'm at an event and I can sit and I'm analyzing everything and I'm seeing, you know, is apparel selling better at this event? Why would that be? Is there reasons, like, is it because of the customer base, or is it because of how I'm displaying it? And I definitely made huge changes in the last few months of last year to change how apparel was being displayed. If you guys have been watching, if you're new here, you probably don't know this, but I have, I'll put them over here so you can see. This was how I originally displayed my market, like, apparel. And sometimes it works really well. Other times people don't even want to flick through racks. They don't want to look. They don't want to, it's just a weird thing that I noticed. And I know some people say that's completely opposite of how they've had it go. I don't know. I just know it from my experience, people haven't really wanted to flip through apparel very often, until I did switch up how I displayed it on racks. But for indoor events, I switched it to this display. We made an Ivor shelf and basically built it out to make it a lot easier for people to look at the designs as well as find their sizes. And so that's been so far so good. We're still testing it out and still growing. I could switch back to only using racks, but it also takes up a lot less space with how I do it now. So things like that, it's just like a constant change from my first event until this last event I had. My last event of December of last year was my best profit one-day event ever. So that was great. It was a great way to end the year. It definitely felt like a gold star on everything I had worked really hard to change and grow and do last year. And then this year, we're about to have my first market, so I'm very excited of 2025, and we'll just see how it goes. I'm going into it again with that lens of what can be improved and what can change. Obviously, if you get into it, if you're somebody who's done a lot of markets, maybe you've been doing it for years and you know exactly how it works, that's great. I do think, though, there always is room for adjustments and change. And if you're somebody that's done markets and you're not getting sales and you feel like people don't stop at your booth, maybe just start looking and seeing people around you. What is drawing people in? Is it, you know, the space is more welcoming? Is there better signage? I think that's definitely things that I personally have, you know, I'll walk into a booth if I'm like, oh, this looks cute. Is your products displayed, you know, well for people to interact with, or is it behind, you know, they can't touch it? It's kind of just a lot of learning and a lot of things, and those are just things I've personally learned with markets, and it's something that I really like. I like the in-person feedback, and I think that's something that I think is super beneficial. And if you're somebody who's like, I don't know if I would do markets all the time, but maybe occasionally, I think it's so helpful to have in-person live reactions to see what's working. And also just seeing if people like make comments, like sometimes they can be mean comments, but seeing like the reason behind it. Usually if people are being mean, though, it is honestly just them and it's not like you being the problem. At least in my experience at events, times that we've had complications with people, it was like their personal beliefs didn't match up with mine, and so I was like, well, maybe this isn't the space for you. Like, it's kind of obvious, you know, stuff like that. It's just like a constant thing. I will say, if you're someone who socially, like, has social anxiety, it gets a little overwhelming. However, I definitely just treat it like if I had a retail job in some ways. Like, yes, I'm the person behind the business, but also I'm interacting and doing customer, you know, checking people out, putting the things in bags. Like, it's things that you're just like used to. So if you're kind of anxious about talking to people, just treat it like a customer service thing, you know? That's just me. I don't know. Those are things I've learned, and I will say that Like literally markets changed my entire business, and it's something I really enjoy doing. It is a lot of work. Prep is not easy. It's a lot of planning and coming up with, you know, there's just a lot of things that can go wrong and there's a lot of things that can go right. But I do think it's definitely worth it trying if you're having a hard time online and you want to expand in your community. So many people, like I have now communities in different areas, like my Spokane group of people that follow me, and then there's the Seattle crew, and then there's a Bellingham and a Portland, and it's definitely exciting to expand those spaces because they've seen me in person and they start following me, or they're like, oh, I saw you at this event. You know, it definitely has been a huge thing, and I get online sales because of my markets. Like I can see that because I give them a code to be able to shop with a discount, you know, and it's a market code, and I'm like, oh, okay, this person was in Spokane because they have a Spokane area code. You know, it's like you can kind of figure out, okay, what areas are doing better and which ones, you know, are you growing. So that's kind of just like the year that I had and what I really think is important for doing markets and things that I want to like dive into with you guys in general in this series. I will say, if you're scared about doing markets, look at the reasons of why you're scared. If it's just because it's something new and it's like you're having to like present yourself in public, I don't know if those are really, like, they could be good reasons, but I don't know if those are reasons not to do something. I do think running a small business, there's a lot of times you have to step out of your comfort zone and try something new, even if it's like, you know, that's scary. But if you're somebody who's trying to diversify their customer base or get a more local customer base, get seen out in public, like if you're not in storefronts or anything, there's some people obviously that have business models that are completely, they sell 100% online, they do wholesale, and if that's you, that's great. But I'm glad you're here to see this too. I do think there's also a lot of people that are so now successful that that's their whole base, and then they do occasional big events. That's awesome too. That's kind of like my hope, is that down the line online would do successful enough where I don't have to do back-to-back-to-back events, because it definitely is exhausting. There's been plenty of events that aren't worth it, and I definitely understand when people are like, I've never sold a thing in a market, because there's definitely events that are not good. Thankfully, I've only had it happen one time where I did not make the booth fee back, and it was like by like a little bit of it was like $10 off, and I was just like, wow, this sucks. And there's been events where I've gone even for free and it's not been worth it because, you know, no one came in. So if you're feeling like you're not getting enough traction at markets, I think you should look at the quality of the market you're doing. You might have to invest in doing some bigger events. I think you should look at your displays and see how people are interacting. If people are not even coming up, look at the why. Don't take it like, oh my god, I suck. Take it as, what can I do to improve? Because I think, like, looking at my first market display, which we'll put over here, that was my very first market. Obviously, a lot of things that I would never do now. It's not bad. I think I did really well for my first event. I spent a lot of time researching this and trying to figure it out and deciding if I wanted to invest in these things, and then compare it to the last 2 markets that I did that were, you know, some of my best events that I really put a lot of time and effort and thought into the display, as well as my inventory and my product lines. And also, like, beginning of last year, when I started doing events in March and doing like these bigger events and expanding, a lot of my products, I feel like, were not products that were like, I did a lot of, like, at first, small business type designs as well as like crafty designs. They did well online, but in person, like, they didn't do well. And it's just like figuring out what does well in person, what kind of event it is, especially if you're doing like themed events. Kind of see if you can make something maybe for it. There's a lot of times people don't need to. There's, you know, if you're somebody who makes soaps, you're like, I'm not gonna make a custom soap for an event. But if you're somebody that's like, I make stickers, maybe if you're at a food event, maybe make some like funny food stickers. I don't know. Just like seeing what is around you and like how to draw customers in, and think about the customers that are at your markets, because that's another thing, is like, you could get into all these markets and like your customer base just might not be there. And there's been times where I've been in an event and I'm like, I don't feel like I fit in at all. Like my design and like my vibe stands out a lot in the Pacific Northwest. And I know it's a good thing now, but when I first started, when I moved here and I started going to these events, I was so anxious because the vibe is very like, you know, natural greens and warm colors and like things that are not pastels, not bright colors, and I was so anxious. And there was definitely a few events where I just like, I sold and I did well, but not like amazing because I wasn't the vibe and I kind of didn't feel like my customer base was there. So yeah, those are just some of the things off the top of the dome that I feel like are important and like I learned in the last year, and I hope to share more with you guys. So let's do a quick talk about what you're gonna have to look forward to in the next 6, or I guess 5, because this one's the 6th, 5 episodes of this series. We're gonna be deep diving into a lot of things, so let's talk about it now. Okay, so you have to look forward to for the next episode is how to take your business from online to markets, because as somebody who did that, I was somebody that only was online. I, you know, only did socials and I only posted and I did not have any in-person interactions with people. And I took it to now majority of my sales are in person, and I'd love to talk about that and break it down, and also just talk about how to find events. Basically the how to get to your first market is going to be our next episode. So I'll be giving you tips on how to find markets and kind of just diving into how to do the whole process. The third episode you'll have to look forward to is going to be how to prep for markets and inventory, and talking about all of the things that it takes to get to your first event. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. If you've been watching my studio vlogs, you probably know that I do a lot of market prep, and I try to be very like, you know, talking through everything. Sometimes I definitely get heads down and like, I'm just making a lot of stickers, but I definitely will talk about the why to the quantities and stuff. I know a lot of you have asked me those questions and I've tried to answer in the past, but we're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk about the why and all of that kind of stuff. Our fourth video we have to look forward to is talking about market displays and ideas, as well as just my decisions on market displays and talking about what you could use maybe. Basically just a huge brainstorm of how to make your display look good and get customers in, because I feel like that's actually something that oftentimes gets looked over because people are like, I bought a table, I got a tablecloth, let's go. And it's like, unfortunately, yeah, I gotta show up like you're a little retail store in your little booth, whatever the size, and you have to make it look cute. So we're gonna talk about that for sure. The next one we're gonna talk about is all the little details that you, oh, my counter's going off. Love that. We're gonna talk about all the details that you might forget before your first market. So all the things that you need to kind of remember that might fall through the cracks, and hopefully will help you not have that happen to you. And we'll have a great little talk about basically everything that you should do on the back end that we didn't cover in inventory and market displays. There's quite a bit. And then our final 6th episode will basically be a big wrap up of everything we learned together, as well as a Q&A. So throughout this whole series, ask your questions below, and you know, I'm going to be trying to collect them all as best I can, and we're going to answer them all on the last episode of this series. So any market questions you have that I don't end up answering in, you know, any of these, and some I might also answer throughout the you know, the videos, because I'll be like, hey, this was already coming up. So that is what you guys have to look forward to for this series. I want to thank you guys so much for watching the first episode, and hopefully it was a little helpful giving you kind of my background as well as talking about what we're going to be covering. So I can't wait to get into this series. I hope it's going to be super helpful for you guys, because I know when I first started doing markets, there wasn't a ton of content on the how-tos of everything, and just kind of like giving information on how to prepare. I watched just a lot of vlogs, and like, vlogs are great. I obviously love them because we make them every week. However, they can also be tedious to comb through, and I want to have more resources for you guys who are trying to expand your business and try new things, and hopefully this will be helpful for you. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and I'll see you all next time.